For as long, going back as far as I can remember, Axel, I was asking the question, what is the point? Like, why are we here? You know, how do you win the game?
Mr. John Strelecky. He's an adventurer, a traveler, and a thinker.
Over 9 million copies sold.
If your goal is to be an unbelievable adventurer, you can pick anyone from the past who has done these types of things, and you can tap into that energy.
Okay.
Nothing.
I love that part. What do you think are a couple of things that maybe future generations, based on your experience and your work, will tell us? Like, maybe you should have done that differently.
You're not alone in that trauma. Somebody else out there is going through the exact same thing. And when you share your experiences, how you failed, how you won, what you learned, that enables that person to do it just a little bit easier.
I have goosebumps. I don't think I have ever shared that story, but you made yourself so vulnerable. So I feel like I want to do that. John, it is an honor to have you here on Success Leaves Clues. We just spoke about it before we started recording. We already had a conversation on your podcast. I think by now the episode will be out. I spoke with your team about it. It was one of those interviews that actually did so much for me. I'm going to tell you later in the conversation why, but I went out of this conversation feeling so good and so empowered. And so today it just feels like another conversation. You said the only regret that you have right now is that we are not sitting in Bali together, overlooking the sea, having this conversation. So first of all, welcome, John. It's an honor to have you here.
Well, thanks. Great to see you again, Axel. And I'm very interested to hear about your reaction to the previous discussion that we had. So hope we get a chance to dig into that. And I do hope that we get a chance to have one of these sitting on the ocean side one time. There's just something, it doesn't, I mean, Bali would be great and that would be awesome.
Yeah.
But whether we can't do it there, we'll do it somewhere else. But there's just something about being on the water that is just, I don't know, it just changes your perspective every second that I'm there.
1,000,000%. I also have to say, you mentioned that exactly that sentence earlier not earlier, but at some point I was listening to a lot of interviews that you did, and so many things that I could relate, or it felt like we have similarities in our journey. Mm-hmm. You went backpacking, had a big impact on your life. You just mentioned the sea, and it just there's this certain feeling. It's really hard to describe. It's like describing how a rose smells, just beautiful. It's a feeling you need to experience. And I think with like some people resonated with for some people, it might be the mountains. I would love to start with your whole backpacking journey and see what it taught you. And maybe take us on a journey with you. If we would be a fly in your head, if I would have been a fly in your head during that time when you said, you know what, I'm going to go start traveling. I'm going to buy a backpack. Or if I remember correctly, you first bought a suitcase, right? And you tried to, right?
Yeah. If we take the story far enough back, it'll be a good example of how to not do it. But that even when you do it in a clueless fashion, you can get enough of a taste of it that then eventually you do it in a way that works better. So maybe we'll both save someone some headaches and also let them know that you don't have to have it all figured out right from the start. So my first trip that was an overseas adventure consisted of 2 trips. One was going to Italy for the first time. That was my first time in Europe. And the second was going down to Costa Rica for a month. And these were after I had finished up. I was working full time and I was going to school at night. And at the same time, I was training to become a professional beach volleyball player. I was not just training, but I was actually playing and competing at the level. Mm-hmm. And so my entire life was scheduled every single second of every single day. If I wasn't training, I was studying. If I wasn't studying, I was working. The few spare moments I had, I was out with my friends doing other stuff that I enjoyed also. And so I had lined up a job that was going to start in August, and my coursework was going to finish in end of April. And so I decided to quit my job and have that 4 months where I could actually just enjoy life after this chaos that I had been living for so long. And so a friend of mine, 2 friends of mine were going to Italy, and they said, would you like to go with us? And so I was like, sure. And I had never been overseas before. And so I was so clueless, Axel. So I got a duffel bag and a suitcase without wheels. Now this was again like a long time ago. So now every suitcase has wheels, but, and so, step number one would have been, get a backpack maybe. That would have been a good step, but I didn't do that. And step number two is I was so clueless that I didn't have a guidebook. Like I get to the country, I don't have a Lonely Planet. I don't have anything that's going to tell me like, here's what's in the city you're going to. And I, honest to God, have no idea what I was thinking. I don't know if I just thought, well, I'll just get there and it'll all magically appear, but whatever. So it was a very good introduction to being clueless, but at the same time, it was a marvelous experience. And I just couldn't believe that I got to stand where history happened. I remember standing in the Colosseum and even walking to the Colosseum. There's a famous Duomo in Italy that is like one of the oldest domos, and it's like a perfect concentric circle on the roof. And I was walking to there, and they were doing road construction, and I looked down and there were like ancient Roman pipes underneath the road. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is amazing. And everybody else is just like, dude, what is your issue? Like, yeah, we do this every day. But for me, Axel, I was standing where I had only read about history, but now I was there. And that was life-changing, absolutely life-changing. And from there, then I took the next trip, which was to Costa Rica, a totally different type of experience. As you might imagine, it's not about history, it's about nature. And I was a little bit smarter on that trip, and it was just completely life-changing. The scene I talk about in Das Café am Rande der Welt, the cafe on the edge of the world, where Mike talks about his experience in Costa Rica, that was based on my actual experience there. So yeah, life-changing.
Oh, wow. You just said something that I know is a theme or part of your teachings, part of your books, not thinking. Less intellect, more instinct, more intuition.
Yeah.
And we did this interview together. You asked me the same question, so I'm like, you make my life very easy. I wanna know, what was it like for you? Because probably if you would have been in your head during that time, you would have said, well, maybe I should stay here. Maybe I should focus on my career. Maybe I should get a nice car, a nice house, and like really double down on that. I don't know how it was, how was your support system reacting to that? But it sounds like, well, do you want to go to Italy? And you're like, yeah, sure. This doesn't sound to me as a head decision. It sounds like more like,
yeah, it was honestly a burned out decision. It was desperation of, in my heart of hearts, I had always wanted to be an adventurer. And the volleyball was certainly filling that, the athleticism part of that was filling that for me and pushing the envelope. From a travel perspective, I had really not checked that box at all. My parents had been kind enough to introduce me to the concepts of travel, but we weren't wealthy enough. I didn't have the financial means where they could take us overseas to see something like that. And so I knew travel, but I knew it on a much smaller scale. And so this was the first big adventure into what that would look like and feel like. Yeah. And so it was a bit of an act of desperation of, okay, I'm getting older and these are opportunities and I should seize them now. And, I think that's important to listen to. You're right. It was an intuitive thing because I didn't plan it out very well. That's for sure. And nonetheless, I think sometimes the universe aligns to conspire to assist you. And in this case, these two opportunities came up at exactly during that window when I was going to be off. And so it worked out perfect.
During that backpacking journey, I'm sure you met a lot of interesting people.
Yeah.
And I'm also sure you had a couple of aha moments. If you connect the dots, if you look back at that very special time, what are maybe one or two of the biggest aha moments? One of maybe a couple of people, a couple of conversations that you will remember for the rest of your life?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, and this was a long time ago. So very often it's hard to remember things that happened 15 years ago, 20 years ago, et cetera. But interestingly, when you ask that question, there are certain things that instantly fly back into my memory.
Yeah.
One of the first ones was we flew into Milan and we were staying just for one night with some friends of one of my friends who I was traveling with. And so, I get off this long flight and I need a shower, and you go into the shower and there's this weird device on the top of the shower head, and you have to turn it on to get hot water, and there's like electrical wiring running from it. And I was like, what in God's name is this thing? Like, where I grew up, there's nothing like that. You want hot water, you just turn it to the left a little bit or to the right a little bit. All the piping is intertwined. But you get into Milan in these old buildings that have been there for 500, 600 years. The only way to get hot water is you do these little electric heaters that sit on top of the shower head. But the idea of having electrical wiring sitting on top of where the water is coming out, I was just like, what? Again, like, what is going on? And so I remember just thinking to myself, wow, that's so cool. Like, this is so different than what I know. And yet for these people, this is their everyday reality. And so it's something stupid like a shower head heater, but extrapolate that concept on a much bigger scale. And that is the realization that, wow, as I travel the world, I'm going to experience realities that are far different from mine. And as a traveler, I can either say, well, that's stupid, that's not the way we do it back home. Or I can be inquisitive and I can say, well, how cool is that? I wonder why they do it that way. And I think this was a great, great life lesson to have learned at that moment, that if we allow ourselves to be inquisitive when we meet people or experience things that are different than what we know, that it opens up the opportunity for us to learn in unbelievable ways. Everything like careers, way in which you go through life, life choices, foods, everything, And so that was very, very powerful for me to have something so small and so simple as a shower head be a transformative moment in the first minutes after arriving in a country.
It's funny because I listened to a podcast yesterday and there was this guy talking about how we take things for granted and how important it is to obviously establish gratitude in your life. And he said, like, just take a hot shower. Do you understand that people 50, 60 years ago, it was winter, you came home, cold outside, you come inside and you're like, okay, I need to take a shower, but it's got to be cold.
Yeah.
So the next time when you stand under, and I love cold exposure, but I also love some hot showers.
Yeah.
The next time when you stand under this hot shower, you're like, oh my gosh, well, I've been taking this for granted for such a long time. And I think if you can learn to appreciate those little things, the quality of your life changes.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were sharing the story, like I had like 4 or 5 stories coming up in my head from traveling. It's been, I think, like, when was it? I'm 29 now. It was like early 20s, 7, 8 years. And I will forever remember this time I spent in India. I shared one story on your podcast, and there's another story. There was this, so I was volunteering in India. And they drive tuk-tuks, as you've probably driven some tuk-tuks in your life. And it was in a village, and the only way you get around there is either an elephant or a tuk-tuk. So I was like, I'll take the tuk-tuk. It was dark, it was night, and there was this tuk-tuk driver. And I'm looking into the tuk-tuk. The guy was sleeping. And so I'm like whispering, I'm like, excuse me, are you working? And he woke up instantly, big smile on his face. Yeah, I'm working. Where do you want to go? Let me know. I'll drive you. No problem. And we started speaking. And he tells me about it. I'm just curious. I have this open mind. I think that's one of the most beautiful things when you travel, to learn about like different cultures and different ideas. And like, oh, really? You can do it like this? I just find it exciting. So he tells me about his normal day, working Monday till Saturday from 6 a.m. until midnight or whenever he needs to work. But he didn't give me the vibes of being stressed or I'm so busy. He's like, I'm happy. I'm having a good time. On Sundays, I go back to my village and I provide for my family. And then a couple months every year, I take time off. I'm like, wait a minute. You work 16 hours per day. You work today 16 hours. Now you're driving me. It's past 10. And you're giving me this attitude, this energy. I was like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with you. If you find a few examples like that and can hold on to them for the rest of your life, it changes the way in which you approach every day. I love the hot water. I think about the hot shower one every day. And and I think about a bed too. You know, if you've, when I was, this is a different trip, but I was going up the Amazon, and when you go up the Amazon, you're on a barge, and on the barge, there's nowhere to sleep. So you buy a hammock before you go, and you sling the hammock, and then you're sleeping in the hammock. Hammocks are not the easiest thing to sleep in for anybody who hasn't done it. You're just like, you're sort of like in a U, you know? And so it's just nothing like a bed, nothing like you've ever been used to. And there's mosquitoes and the rest of that. And but it was a marvelous experience. I'm so glad I had it. But when you've had a few of those, or when you've hung out with people who live in the Amazon and you realize that they sleep on a little woven mat that is like 3 millimeters thick, and it's on wood planking floor, it just totally shifts your perspective about how lucky you are that you actually get to sleep in a bed every night. I mean, so there's not a night that I go to sleep now that I don't think about that. And I think, to your point, that the earlier in life you can get these experiences, the more beneficial, because as you were saying, that was when you were in your early 20s. I didn't have my first moments like that until I was in my late 20s. And so you already got 7 more years of that perspective to apply and to grow, because I think it's a layered thing. You don't just learn it and then it just sits at that level. You build upon those layers of gratitude. And so my recommendation to everybody is go as soon as you can. Like, there's nothing like travel to give you a different perspective about the world and a sense of gratitude for just, I think you mentioned this in our podcast, and it's funny because I've had this 100% exact same thing, Axel, which is I did nothing to deserve the passport I have. Like, I get to travel the world. I get a chance to earn income in a country where the currency is very strong. And I didn't earn that right. I just was gifted that right. And with that gift, to me, becomes a sense of responsibility. You know, well, maybe I need to be doing something good with this. First of all, I should definitely be fulfilling my purpose with this. And if part of that is travel, I have an obligation to whatever system gave me this opportunity. But second of all, the more I travel and the more I go to places that are very, very third world, the more I realize just what an incredible gift this is. And I have an obligation to give back, because so many people do not have that gift. I remember meeting a guy in Burma, and he was desperately trying to save $75, because if he could save $75, he could get a work visa to go work in Thailand. And if he could leave Myanmar and go to Thailand, he could make 3 times the money, because the currency exchange rate was so much better, to bring back to his family. Like, I mean, think about that. For you and me, like 75 euros, like you could make that in nothing, right? And so it was just very eye-opening, very life-changing to meet people like that as I traveled around the world.
I have goosebumps.
Yeah, like, because it's the whole, like, I didn't do anything to deserve it, a thing that I think gets me every time. And so you can either just look at that as like, oh, I'm just, you know, I deserve this, but I just can't see going through life like that. How can you think you deserve it when you didn't do anything to deserve it? And so therefore, if we open up the curiosity and say, well, if you didn't do something to deserve it, then what comes with that prize package? A sense of responsibility. Okay, let me see if I can make a positive difference in the life of another human in a different setting who doesn't have the same opportunities that I have.
Changes everything, doesn't it? Because all of a sudden you're asking, like, what can I bring to life? What can I bring to the community, instead of like, what do I expect from it?
Yeah. What is the goal of my trip? You know, is the goal of my trip to get, or is the goal of my trip to get and give? Certainly I'm going to get, every time you interact with another person in another culture, and they're kind enough to share their foods, their stories, their traditions, that you're getting. And that's all beautiful. At the same time, what are you reciprocating with, so that there's balance in the universe?
I love that. And I think there is this funny concept to love and to giving. Whenever you give, you also get something.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Because like when you make someone else happy, if you help someone else out, it also gives you, it should of course not be the intention. Otherwise it would not be, you know, giving, it would be like trading something. But whenever we give love, we kind of also feel love. Like when you bring someone flowers and you see the happiness of that person, it makes me smile just talking about it.
Yeah, totally. And maybe that's the hardwiring that exists within our DNA, is this process where bringing joy to others brings us joy too. And the
Yes.
question is simply, how often do we allow ourselves to tap into that experience? And I think maybe that's part of the human struggle, because usually trauma is caused from childhood experiences that create code and belief systems. And sometimes it's, I'm not worthy. Sometimes it's, I'm not capable. Sometimes it's, the system is rigged against us, or that money is evil. Like, everybody's got their own story depending on what they went through. But maybe that's part of the human struggle, is to realize that we can allow ourselves to heal from those pieces of trauma. And what we may find in the code underneath that is this underlying core essence that when I do something that makes someone else feel good, I also feel good, for example, right? When I exist in a state of gratitude, it changes the way in which I perceive the inputs in my life. And so, yeah, I think that's a really good, interesting example of kind of what is the purpose of life. Maybe it is to get beyond these traumas and then open up this other piece of the whole story.
When did this mindset, when was it born? Was it something that came while you were traveling? Because, I mean, fast forward, we see those beautiful books around you, and, you know, I think at this point, 9 million people have bought one of your books. By the way, at 10 million, there should be like a big party in Bali or something.
We already crossed 10.1, so we should have
you
had the
crossed
party.
already 10.1.
Yeah.
Dang it, I should have done better research then.
No, your research was right. It's funny because I was on a meeting yesterday about a film for the cafe book, and so they were like, "Oh, can you give us updated numbers?" And I was like, "Oh, wait, we crossed 10.1." So,
well, congratulations.
Thank you. It's a big announcement. We can't be in Bali, but we're doing it here on your podcast, Axel. This is the celebratory moment. Yeah.
10 million people. So you have been giving. Was there a point in your life, or maybe a role model, that created this almost like a willingness, almost like intention to give and make other people's lives better, to serve? Because that's, if you read your books, if you do, I could feel it from the first moment when we started speaking. You are someone who just wants to give.
Well, I appreciate that. There's definitely been role models and influences in my life that showed me the power of kindness and making a difference in the lives of others. And I would say certainly my family has always been a piece of that. You know, like probably every family, there were certainly struggles, and built into the infrastructure of the relationships, there were challenges. But at the end of the day, I knew that like they were there for me and that they had my back. And so that was a big piece of, I think, my learning early on. And then honestly, it actually ties into what we were just talking about. I had to get beyond my own struggles, beyond my own insecurities, beyond my own code that I had adopted and embraced, unfortunately. And so when I got beyond my own traumatic code, that's when I started to realize that I actually had something to offer. And bizarrely enough, because I think this is one of those pieces of the whole algorithm, what I had to offer was one of the things I had to discover for myself. And that is that you're not alone. Like, I had spent my whole life asking the question, is this all there is? Because I would look at people that were unhappy, mostly adults that were out there working at jobs that didn't make them happy. And they were going to do that for 40 plus years. I didn't like school. I didn't see the point of school. No teacher ever explained to me, connecting the dots of like, this is why this is actually important for your life and for your career. And so for as long, going back as far as I can remember, Axel, I was asking the question, what is the point? Like, why are we here? You know, how do you win the game? Imagine any game that you play. The first thing you do is you look at the rules, you look at the instructions. How do I play? How do I win? How do we have fun? None of that seemed to be apparent to me as I was going through life, but my own issues and my own insecurities kept me from believing that I had a place in all of that. So when I finally got rid of those issues, or started to move beyond those issues, I could finally start to realize that I wasn't the only one asking these questions. And that really was the genesis of, I think, why the books do so well. It's because so many people, when I do book signings, come up to me and say, I thought I was alone. I thought I was the only one asking these questions that you're asking in the books and telling the stories that you tell. And so that was a big aha for me, that part of it is just embracing whatever unique gifts that you have. And a lot of times, crazy enough, Those gifts are you overcoming and dealing with your own trauma. That's the gift that you have to share with others, because you're not alone in that trauma. Somebody else out there is going through the exact same thing or a very close variant of it. And when you share your experiences, how you failed, how you won, what you learned, that enables that person to do it just a little bit easier, a little bit better. And that's the gift.
This podcast is relatively young, and if you want to support our mission to give you access to the most extraordinary minds, to the most helpful success recipes, well, then you can do something that takes about 3.5 seconds, which is to subscribe to this podcast. Gives us the ability to give you access to the most amazing guests. So just click on that button, helps a lot, takes 3.5 seconds. Thank you so much, and I'll see you later.
I love that. It reminds me of this sentence: struggles are, or problems are growth opportunities. Problems are opportunities. A problem always comes with an opportunity, and you can turn it into something amazing. I just had a conversation just before we started. I was talking to my friend, and we were saying how the things we were bullied for in school are now the things that make us successful in a way.
Yeah.
Like I was wild, I was chaotic, and that skill to be wild, to think outside of the box and ask, just like you just said, like ask questions like, why are we doing this? Why is everybody doing it like this? That thing I was criticized for, I struggled with, and now it's one of my biggest gifts.
Sure. Yeah, well, so you asked where this stuff comes from, and the answer is I believe I have the luxurious experience at this point in my life of co-collaborating with something so much bigger than me that I could not even begin to explain it. I don't know why I get to be part of this experience. I'm humbled every time it happens, but when I sit down to write, I connect with something that is way bigger than me, and I know that for sure because I'll be in the process of writing a book, and a piece of the dialogue will come through me and I'm typing it. And I know for sure, Axel, like 100% sure that piece of wisdom was not in my head a second before it was just there. And so where is it coming from?
Relate.
Yeah. And so it's funny because I'm working, like I mentioned, on the cafe movie, and the thing I keep telling myself, because I'm struggling with pieces of the conversion from the book to a movie script, because a movie has bad guys and a movie has tension that the cafe book doesn't have. And part of the reason I think people like the cafe book is because it doesn't have tension. It's like it's a calming experience, right? But a movie needs to have that in order to be that kind of a visual experience. But I keep telling myself the story is already out there. Like the whole movie has already been written. All I need to do is tap into it. And it's amazing. When I do that, I'll just be sitting there and I'll just be reflecting on something, and all of a sudden a piece of dialogue hits me or a scene will hit me. And I'm like, all right, that was not in my head 2 seconds ago. So I don't know where it comes from, but I know it's going to be a winner. And I'll get goosebumps. So like you talked about goosebumps before. Like I get...
I just had them again.
Did you? Yeah. I get physical clues that are indications that something that just flowed through me is really, really important. It happens every time that I write a book. It happens now that I'm working on the movie. And so I think part of life is learning to decode those types of connections to whatever this cosmic algorithm of the universe is. So for you and I, we've mentioned goosebumps, it might be that. There's times when I get teary, like I'll just have an extreme emotional reaction, like it brings literally tears to my eyes. For somebody else, it might be something totally different. But I think the question is, what does your decoder ring look like? And the sooner you can identify that and start to become fluent in your language with the cosmic algorithm, then the easier it is to go through life fearless and effortless. And now the interesting thing is, just about the time you think you got it all figured out, you feel like you're 100% fluent with it, the game is going to change. And so we're not designed to have figured it all out, but these tools, once we have them, are permanently at our disposal. And that is what gives us comfort, even in the midst of the new level of chaos, whatever that looks like and feels like.
There were a couple of aha moments for me. And I remember you mentioning you did a couple of podcasts with a couple of German colleagues, I would call them, and I had such a good time listening to them. And you mentioned one thing that fits in perfectly with this. You said you wrote one of your books. I can't remember which one it was. In 21 days.
The first cafe book was 21 days.
The first cafe book, I don't know how many million people read that book. Took you 21 days. We finished my first book. And before I started writing this book, success leaves clues. I go to successful authors who are either friends or people who have been on my podcast. And I'm like, can you tell me a couple of tips, a couple of things I should know before I start writing the book, a couple of, shortcuts or a couple of mistakes I should avoid. And from many people, I heard the sentence like, writing a book is such a pain in the ass. And I'm like, okay. But a couple of people also enjoyed it. So I want to be on their side. I want to know what did they do. And when we wrote the book, it took us 22 days, by the way. I counted after you said it. I hired someone who's good at writing because I know my story. I know it's good. I need someone who is a native speaker and B, can write, because I'm not a native speaker. And I mean, I can write, but not that good. So I need someone who's really good. And it turns out that's one of my closest friends. We wrote that book in 22 days, 2 of them spending in Mallorca. And we had the time of our lives.
That's awesome. That is so awesome.
And it felt like it was, I don't know where it came from, but it was just flowing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was like, I've never thought of this, but it just came out somewhere. Everything was so like beautifully connected and in such a flow. And we didn't overexhaust ourselves. We just had a really good time. And I think it's because what you just said, it's because it's not about me. It's not about you. It's about something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
It's about serving.
Yeah. Well, I think there's so many great elements of that story that I hope everyone listening to thinks about and reflects on as it relates to whatever endeavor they're working on, whatever adventure they're in the midst of. And so often in life, we have a perception of something that is entirely based on data that may or may not be correct. And so imagine if the only people that you had been in contact were the ones who said, yeah, writing a book is a major pain in the ass. Like, it takes 1 year to 2 years. Your mind would have been entirely thinking that, and it would have been creating processes and methodologies and coping mechanisms all for that. But the minute that you hear that someone else had the experience of writing it in 21 days, now it reframes for you, and it was a positive experience. Now it reframes from you what that could look like, what it could feel like. And then you made something which is, like, I think one of the most critical choices in life. You had 2 data points there, and you chose the one that was more in alignment with the experience you wanted to have. I see this going the wrong way a lot. Like, people are afraid that if they don't know all the negative stuff, then they won't be able to succeed. And I often tell this story, and I won't tell the whole story, but it's basically something called focus on the one. And the short, super short version of it is that if your life depends on it, focus on the one person or short group of people, the one group of people who have done, seen, or experienced life in the ways that you want to do, see, or experience it. Because you could literally spend the rest of your life focusing on the other 99% to try and figure out all the points at which they failed, all the things that didn't go well. But why? Like, you're using incredibly large amounts of energy, resources, minutes to do that. I'd much rather just focus on what worked and go with that. Now, there may be some gaps in your knowledge, sure. But at that moment, when you find the gap, you can figure out, well, who's another person who filled that gap successfully? And you can fill that in. I just find that life is so much easier with that method. That took me a long time to figure out, but it is one of the most important things that I've ever done. And you beautifully demonstrated it in your story. The choices were sitting there in front of you. Like, who do I go talk to? And you chose the one that was a more effortless and easy path. And look how great it worked out for you. 22 days. And not only 22 days, but 22 days, and you described it as fun and effortless and connecting to something that was even bigger than you imagined beforehand. Like, that's a winning formula.
That story just reminded me of the story of Roger Bannister. I don't know if you...
The 4-minute mile is a perfect example of exactly that. Our perception of reality gets shifted dramatically with the success of one human being I just saw an amazing movie, Young Woman in the Sea. And it's the story of the first woman to ever swim the English Channel. The movie itself is beautifully done. It's shot really well. The acting is incredible. And because I'm so focused on movies these days and structure, the beats and what they did to create a great movie is like spot on. But I get done with that, Axel, and like it's an interesting example because you know from the start of the movie, like she's going to do it. Like that's the whole premise, the first woman to ever swim the English Channel. So you know going in, it's going to be a victory. But they created suspense, they created drama, and they made it relatable in a way that everybody who's ever been in water ever can relate to. And they absolutely pulled it off. And then what's interesting is not only did she do it, this woman, but she did it in 2 hours less than it had ever been done by the previous 4 people, which were all male swimmers. And once that was done, just like Roger Bannister breaking the 4-minute mile, now everybody has a different perception of what is possible. What can reality look like? Like, what a gift, you know? And the cool thing, here's a major thing for me. And I want to hear if you have examples of this in your life too. One of the things I see sometimes with people when they're struggling is they're looking for an example, but they have a filter system that requires the example look just like them. And so if they're going to work on a book, they would be like, oh, well, yeah, but Axel is 28 or 29 and I'm 35. So like that doesn't apply to me. Or Axel's a guy, I'm a woman, so that doesn't apply. I need to find a female author who's also 35. Oh, this author is female and 35, but she lives in Hamburg and I live in Berlin, different culture. That doesn't work. And they start applying all these filters. But if you do it the reverse way and you say, I actually have the capacity to learn and be inspired from every story and not just the human stories. What if I can be inspired by nature? What if I can look at the way ants build something? Or I have these ants in my backyard, Axel, and they are the most perseverant little creatures ever, man. They are determined to build their little ant pile. Like every single day they're out there just working on it, right? And if I, as a human being, am willing to open up my field of vision and field of inspiration sources and say, well, I'm not an ant, I'm a human, but I can certainly admire their perseverance. Like imagine the sources of inspiration that are out there for us. I think that's a way better methodology. And that is something I struggled with for a long time. And once I finally got over my personal issues with that, holy cow, unbelievable the sources of inspiration you can get.
Just for those of you who are listening or watching who don't know who Roger Bannister is, he's the guy who broke the first or ran the first 4-minute mile. And he wasn't, the Usain Bolt of his generation. He was a good runner, but not like the best. But he said, I have this goal, I want to do it. And news, it was everywhere. Doctors said, it's not possible. It's just like something the human body is not capable of. You can't run a mile faster than 4 minutes. But he did it. And what I love about the story, on the day he did it, the weather wasn't good. Like the circumstances were not even great. But he did it anyways. He trained for it. And that's not the actual big aha moment in that story. The aha moment is that in the years after, a lot of other people did it as well.
Yeah, the belief system shifted in what was possible.
Exactly. And so I'm always careful, or I try to, when I have beliefs about what's possible and what's not possible, to remind myself of that story. We are probably believing in some things that future generations will call you guys were clueless.
What a great perspective. Yeah. Yeah.
What did you do? So I always want to know, okay, if I could meet someone in 1,000 years, what would those people tell me? They were I have a couple of good guesses. It's probably not a smart idea to just work and wait until you retire to fulfill your dreams, to go travel, to go on a trip with your kids. That maybe doesn't make so much sense. I'm pretty sure we'll be doing that. There are a couple of clues that I have in terms of health, like maybe eating fast food all the time and giving it to our kids, maybe not the best idea. You maybe don't want to do that. What do you think are a couple of things that maybe future generations, based on your experience and your work, will tell us? Like, maybe you should have done that differently as society.
Well, it's funny because as you were describing that story, I was thinking the crazy thing is if you talk to an 80-year-old, they'll tell you exactly the same. Like, we don't have to go 1,000 years in the future. Talk to someone who's in your neighborhood who's 80 years old, and they'll tell you that you're probably going to get to 80. And if all you did was work at a job that you didn't like, you're going to be somewhat regretful, probably a lot regretful. And so here's my perspective on that. It's a tremendous experience to talk to someone who's had more time on the planet than you, whether it's 10 years or 40 years.
Yes.
They give you a totally different perspective. I never imagined this phase of life that I'm at now would look and feel exactly like it does. And so it's really beneficial to have those conversations. I think projecting it much farther ahead to your question, without a doubt, I'm quite convinced that they would look back and be like, what were y'all thinking with the whole pollution thing? Like, there were ways to do it that were sustainable and that were much more environmentally friendly, that were win-wins. And so why the whole focus on the plastic packaging for everything, and why the focus on the microplastics in the ocean? You guys were smarter than that. You had the capacity to figure out solutions. Why didn't you? And I think the answer to that always comes down to us as an individual. We can look at our own life and say, well, what choices can I make? It may not have the global impact, but it certainly impacts my one life or the life of my family. And therefore, what small choices can I make that move me in the direction that I want to go? I can eat less foods that are prepackaged in small individual serving size plastic containers. I can probably do my best to avoid anything that is packaged in something that has an expiration date that is 12 to 24 months in the future. And that comes with a shift that just says, well, what is the point of food? The point of food is to feed your body. And how healthy is the thing if it's 24 months in the future? I'm not saying that anybody should change their behaviors based on me. I'm just saying allowing ourselves to ask that question opens up a window of internal dialogue that can lead you down some wonderful rabbit holes and lead you to places that end up with you healthier, and maybe the planet's a little bit better off. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's probably what the 1,000 years in the future question would kind of revolve around. Why didn't you guys use the smarts that you had to do better stuff?
I love that. And now if we go exactly the opposite direction. If you look back to writing this book, first of all, I'm curious, when you were writing, it was the first book you've ever written, or?
It was, yeah. The Cafe was the first book that I had no plans to be an author, no dreams to be an author.
Okay.
Nothing.
I love that part. I don't think I've heard that in other podcast interviews with you. It's the first book you've ever written. You were not an author before that.
No, it's the first thing I've ever written of any length. Yeah. Probably the longest thing I ever wrote before then was some term paper in college.
I love it. And at the time when you were writing the book, did you know, or like, did you have a feeling like, hey, that stuff is actually really good and millions of people will read this?
No. I had come back from my travels. So we had talked about the early phase of my travels, but I'll just fill in a tiny bit of background here, which is,
yes, please.
So after I came back from that first adventures of going to Italy and then going to Costa Rica for a month, I came back from that, and I remember sitting at the airport and writing in my journal, like, never forget these feelings, because it was this tremendous sense of freedom and curiosity and amazement at the world and calm, because I had been so, like, every minute of my life was scheduled. And then you can't really do Costa Rica back when I did it and not be calm. The country was just so chill back then. And you surfed, you ate pancakes on the beach, everything was inexpensive. It's not that way now, sadly, but it was just so chill and a very different reality. So I literally wrote in my notebook, never forget this exists. And then sadly, Axel, I then spent the next 5 years forgetting that it existed and re-immersing myself in the rat race of chaos. And so then when I was in my early 30s, I realized I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. My life is passing me by, and I left it all behind and backpacked around the world for a year. And so that was a far deeper immersion into this amazing experience of the adventurous side of me. And that one stuck. Like, that one I couldn't forget. And when I came back from that experience about 4 months after that is when the cafe story flowed through me. It flowed through me over the course of the 21 days. I always say it was less an act of me writing than it was of me opening up a channel to something that was already there. I simply needed to be the conduit between it and the reality of the human experience. So it flowed through me over the course of 21 days. I never pre-thought what I was going to type. I didn't even read the stuff that I'd typed the previous days. I was aware of what was coming through me. And so I was getting it, not just typing it. I was hearing it. I was understanding it. And so, yeah, I was aware at the time it was flowing through me that there was like really interesting stuff coming through me, but I had no idea what it would become. But I was very tapped into my intuition, because when you travel, as you and I have talked about, a lot of times you're in places where that's all you have to rely on is your intuition. And so when my intuition said, sit down and type, I just sat down and typed, even though I didn't know what was going to happen from that. And, but you get clues along the way. I've often told this story, so I won't tell the whole story, but the very first person ever to read the completed manuscript, her opening words to me were, your book has changed my life. And so that was a massive clue that I was onto something, that there was a reason that this was coming through me. You know, the first time we ever got an order from another country, I was like, what the heck? Like, how in the world did somebody in another country like learn about this book? That was another big clue, you know? And so along the way, there were lots of clues that something good was going to happen. But no, I never could have imagined all the success that has come from it, all the amazing, beautiful stories that I've heard from readers. Never could have imagined it.
You were just listening to your heart.
Yeah. And I think there's another piece of it, which I really want people who are listening to embrace. And that is that I do believe every life has a purpose. I don't think there is just randomness to the human experience.
1,000,000%.
And so part of the opportunity as we're alive on the planet is to open ourselves up to asking that question, what is my purpose? Right? This is the first question in the cafe book. Why am I here? What is my purpose on the planet? And if we allow ourselves to be open to that concept and to embrace the fact that, yes, we're capable of adding value, like we have something to offer, we have genius to share with the world, whether it's as a chef, as a parent to your kid, as an entrepreneur by building a company, as someone who designs an invention that is going to purify water. I don't know, like everybody's got something. And don't get caught up in the million numbers either. Like that's a very dangerous game to get caught up in, because being a parent to your kid is every bit as important as selling 1 million books or designing something that impacts 1 million lives or whatever. Like in the eyes of the universe, one is the same as 1 million. Like the goal is simply to be the best version of you that fulfills your purpose. It's not to get caught up in what everybody else is doing.
Yes.
And if we allow ourselves to do that and we open up that channel in much the same way as I said, like I believe the cafe movie is already out there. I just need to open it up and download it. In much way the cafe book flowed through me. I believe our purpose is the same. Like you're going to get clues along the way. Some of it is selection. I often warn people against this. I think sometimes because of movies, we have this perception that, oh, there's going to be like that booming voice from the sky moment, right? And it's going to be, Axel, your calling is to do physical fitness work. And then you will open yourself up through your book, right? And we're waiting for this booming voice from the sky to tell us.
Yeah.
But very rarely in life does it actually work out that way. When you're traveling the world as an adventurer, you're having conversations with others. You're noticing something that you didn't see and you get a goosebumps moment. You're just trying something you've never tried before and you're like, whoa, this is cool. And so part of discovering your purpose is putting yourself out there and seeing what feels right.
So what feels right.
Yeah. So it's a combination of things. Yes, the channel is there, but you have to be doing your part to sort of open up that channel. And I think that comes from sampling and doing and talking and being curious. And then once you start to get that glimpse into what your purpose is, like then it's using the same tools and techniques that you already described. Okay, I think I have something to share. Well, all right, how do you want to share it? Video format? Who's out there doing something that you like in the video format? What can you imitate? You know, if it's a book, who's doing a book in the way that you like books? So the clues are all there. It's just us allowing ourselves to believe that we have a purpose and believe that we're capable and that we're worthwhile. That goes back to the childhood trauma. But I will tell you, like, once you do that, man, oh man, life gets really interesting in really good ways.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't imagine
Sometimes-
being the parent that I got to be and having the joy that I have had over the years with my kid if I didn't allow myself to be that guy. Like, that would have been such a travesty. Like, I think I'm a really good parent, not to brag, but I think I'm a really good dad because I knew that I wanted to be, and I loved it so much that I allowed myself to learn from everybody around me, and I allowed myself to be a complete goofball, which was one of the great easy things to being a great dad, like just have fun with your kid and be a goofball. And earlier in my life, when I didn't have the confidence or the trust in myself, I never could have been that guy, ever. So in that respect,
Yeah,
Axel,
it takes so much courage.
yeah, and in that respect, you talk about the give and take we talked about before. I've never thought of this before, so thank you for this question, this interview. Because were it not for the fans who have said to me, thank you, that there was something in the cafe book that changed my life or that meant something to me, like they helped build the confidence in me. And again, I've never thought of this before, that helped me be the guy that I became as a dad. Like that's super cool. Like I owe it all to the fan base in so many respects for building me up that I got to be that guy.
Appreciation.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1,000,000%. While you were speaking, there were a couple of images that just popped to my head. For some reason, I don't think I have ever shared that story, but you made yourself so vulnerable. So I feel like I want to do that. My mother died very soon after I was born. And this is something I learned like a year ago. My sister told me that story, that my mom was told that she could, like before I was born, that she could never have kids again, that it was not possible. And she was already sick. But she listened to her heart. She's like, I want to have another baby. And imagine you want to have another baby and doctors are telling you, it's not a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
But she's like, no, I'm going to do it. And that was her purpose at that time.
Wow. Yeah.
And oh boy, if she would have not listened to that, I wouldn't be here. And I'm different in the sense, like I want to inspire millions of people. This feels like right to me. For me, it would feel incredibly wrong right now to say like, I'm not going to work, I'm not going to write books, I'm not going to make videos, I'm not going to do podcasts, and I'm going to commit my life to a baby. Like it would just feel not right.
Mm-hmm.
But she fulfilled, like she listened to her heart, and to get like, I wish I could, and I can have a conversation with her and just like, you see, like without you doing this, without you being such a great mother, I wouldn't be doing anything here because I wouldn't be alive.
Yeah.
And the same, like then the next picture popped up, my grandma. And I think I spoke about my grandma in the interview we did together on your podcast. Her whole purpose was being the best grandma possible. And she installed all of the, like without her, same thing. Like I have to say, without my grandma, I wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't be serving. It was all she did, we glorify and put it on a pedestal of like, you have to have that big business and inspire millions of people. Her biggest joy in life was to make her grandkids happy at that point when I got to spend time with her. And because of that, I can do the things that I'm doing right now. And it helps me, like her actions, even though it was just with one person, impacts millions of lives. It's unbelievable. So thank you for sharing that.
I think that when we die, that's part of what we get to see is the downstream ripple effect of the lives that we touched. And you'll probably never know in your lifetime. And hopefully your grandma got a glimpse into that. Your mom having passed away. It's funny because you say you have conversations, or you can still tell her, still thank her. My father passed away a couple of years ago now, but I talk to him regularly. Something good will happen, and I'll just talk to him. And in my belief system that, yeah, that person can hear me, and you can still have that dialogue, and I want them to know, I want them to understand I'm getting it. I'm starting to see the way in which your actions, the things that you gave to me, required self-sacrifice on your part, but I want you to know that it was not for naught. Like, good things have come from this, and I want you to celebrate that with me. And I think when we take a moment and have that internal conversation, that it enables that energy to flow better. And so I think it's totally worth doing. Yeah.
Quick one, but important one. If you enjoy this podcast, you will love our Fire Within retreats. We create not just retreats, but life-changing experiences, usually at very beautiful places. It's for everyone who honestly loves to grow. That's the only requirement we have. During those days, you will, yes, have a blast. You will meet amazing people. You will cry, you will laugh, you will jump, you will do things that you've never done before. And for sure, you will grow. It's a perfect mix between relaxation, recharging, and growing and learning new things and creating the life that you really want and that you really deserve. You will walk out of there with a big smile on your face, recharged. Usually people who come to our retreats don't use their phone during that time. It's really time for you to reflect, to create consciously the life that you want. If you would like to relax, and I mean really relax, recharge, and learn life-changing tools, click the link that you will find underneath this video. You will get a special prize as a listener of this podcast. Thank you so much. And who knows, maybe I see you in Italy, in Spain, Austria, or wherever we decide to host a retreat. Now let's continue.
I have conversations. It might sound crazy, but it makes it two of us. No, I have regularly conversations with my mother. Like 2 days ago, I had a breathwork session, and sometimes, I mean, I do breathwork every day, but sometimes I breathe with people who are not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this beautiful dialogue with my mother, which is, like I used to say, I never met my mom, but I meet her now all the time. And she gives me answers. I ask her, like, usually when I struggle with something, I ask her questions.
Yeah.
And just this, like, I know what she would say. I'm like, oh, thank you. Got it.
Mm-hmm. This ties back to your early question about the 1,000 years from now. Right now, we don't think it's weird at all that you and I, now we're on a Zoom call here and doing this interview, but let's say that we just called each other, right? And so we both have a tiny little box that has a piece of glass on the front of it and some kind of wirings and a battery in the box. But if I just touch the box a certain amount of times, 9 times or 10 times, whatever the phone number is, and I hit another piece of the glass, magically your voice and face will appear on my little box, and my voice and face will appear on your little box. This despite the fact that we are literally thousands and thousands of kilometers apart from each other. We don't think that's weird at all. Like, we just accept that as reality. And so maybe 1,000 years from now, they'll be like, yeah, didn't you guys get that? That when a soul is no longer in the physical form, it's still a soul. And so you can still interact with it. You just don't need the box. You actually have an ongoing open channel there. You just literally have to hit connect in your mind, and then you're connected, and you can talk as much as you want. And so maybe that's the message 1,000 years from now. They're gonna be like, yeah, I guess you guys didn't quite get that one, but it was available the whole time.
Oh my goodness. Yes. And I remember I went to a retreat. I didn't host it. I went there as a guest last year, and there was this one exercise with 2 pillows. One pillow representing my mother and one pillow representing my grandmother. And it was just pillows. Mm-hmm. But I was sobbing. Like, I was crying. It felt so real. Mm-hmm. And so I honestly, I wish I would have known about this tool a bit earlier, especially growing up. It would have been nice to have those conversations.
Yeah.
It would have been really, really nice to have my grandma around more often. Because if I just ask her, like, what would you do in this case? She would be like, this. I'm like, oh, okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the sooner, this kind of goes back to the travel thing, the sooner we can learn these concepts and apply them in our life and just test it out, everybody who's listening. Like if it sounds like Axel and I are on crazy juice right now, okay, but try it. Just, go for a walk in the woods one day and have a conversation. And by the way, I'm going to extrapolate this to a whole new level of potentially crazy juice, but in my life experience, I've realized that you can actually have these conversations with anyone that has been alive in the past. So if your goal is to be an unbelievable adventurer and you want to take on massive adventure type challenges, you can pick anyone from the past who has done these types of things and you can tap into that energy and you can get answers. And again, I don't know if it's because it's sitting in the collective consciousness of all things that have ever happened. So maybe when we die, that our spirit, our soul, our adventures, our thoughts, our wisdom, that maybe we didn't even share these things with other people, but they were all thoughts and ideas we had in our head. This all enters the massive database of collective consciousness. And that consciousness is available to anybody who decides they want to open the button and tap into it. And so when you ask yourself about how do I deal with this adventure that I'm going on, and you tap into Thor Heyerdahl, or you tap into some other adventure, John Glenn who went into space, whatever, but you tap into someone who's been very adventurous in life, I find that I get answers. And while I can't exactly explain where the answers are coming from, I do believe that maybe this is the answer. It's in the collective ether. And man, what a powerful piece of knowledge that is when I'm facing a challenge that I don't know how to deal with, whether it's an emotional reaction to something or a technical challenge, if I'm doing something that's more engineering or structural focused, that there's a whole wealth of resources out there that goes much bigger than just Google. And so allow yourself to tap into these. And the cool thing about Google is it sort of gives you a benchmark for how do I do this? Well, in Google, you just go in there and you type in your question and Google will search the database and spit it out. Well, I use that same sort of visual and be just like, well, I'm typing in my question into the cosmic algorithm and I'll see what gets spit back to me.
I do that even, I tell my best friend who wrote the book with me, he's one of the kindest people I know, the most patient people I know. He is such a calm soul. So sometimes when I have a team and whenever I get into conflict with human beings, I'm like, what would Josh say? How would he handle it? Yeah. And he's alive. I could call him. Yeah. It's just 10 times quicker because I already know what he would say.
Yeah, that's an awesome methodology for either dealing with our emotional reactions.
His phone is always off, so
But I love that. And to me, that you're talking about your grandmother and your mom, that keeps them in the game. Like I said, it just continues to validate the contributions and the gifts that they gave to you and their role in everything that you will create. And and again, here's another little twist on that I was talking about some of the different stories and the way they flow through me. So Life Safari or Safari des Lebens flowed through me over the course of 10 days. That's the fastest I've ever written any book. But I literally, 10 days, I literally sat down, Axel, and I had the house totally myself and wrote kind of nonstop 10 hours a day for 10 days and it was done. But it wasn't even writing. It was the same kind of thing. It was flowing through me so fast that my job was just to try and keep up with it as it was flowing through me. And I was seeing the scenes and trying to describe the scenes. And I had never connected with the essence of the character that I introduced in that book, Mama Gombe, who is this very wise, very old African woman. And yet, ever since the story first started flowing through me, there is an energetic connection to her spirit. And I can connect with her anytime from this point on, as I'm sure readers of the book can. I don't think her spirit is uniquely available to me because I was the conduit to the story. But so what's interesting about that to me is that this was an entity that I never had a live interaction with. And yet it was still available to me as a source of inspiration, wisdom, guidance. That is very interesting to me in the way that the cosmic algorithm works.
A question that I knew I would like to ask is in regards to your daughter. The podcast is called Success Leaves Clues. And we also just talked about, how you can almost channel in energy. And if you would think what would this person say right now? You kind of get the answer. Mm-hmm. So the podcast is called Success Leaves Clues. One day, I want to sit down in Bali at the beach and write this book and put the best success recipes in terms of the best tips in terms of health, wealth, relationships, fulfillment in life. I want to put everything into one book. And if I ever have kids, I'll hand it over to my kids. If I don't have kids, I'll hand it over to the world. And, well, I hand it over to the world anyways. But if I would have your daughter sitting here, and it sounds like she taught you a lot.
Yeah.
What do you think would be one of the tips, one of the success recipes she would want to share?
I think you just raised a very awesome point, and this would be one of the first things, and that is that when a soul joins another soul in the human experience, it's an opportunity for both to collaboratively learn from each other. I think a lot of times people get into parenting and they think, oh, my job is to teach that kid everything. It's not true. The child's spirit and your spirit are there to learn from each other. And so I have learned so many pieces of life wisdom through the experience of being her father. I've done my best to impart things that will help her on her life journey. But one of the things that I often quote is a single phrase, and it's that anger is a manifestation of fear. And this is based on an experience that I had driving with her. She was only like 2 years old.
That's what she said?
No, but it was her presence in my life that taught me that. She was like 2.5 years old. She was in her car seat in the back seat of my truck. And I was driving down the road and a person cut me off. And I instantly was angry about it. And they were like flying down the road. And I remembered thinking to myself, like, why am I so angry about this right now? And it was like one of those where like the anger is instantaneous and throughout your entire being. So you know it's something big, right? And so I started to ask myself these questions internally, like, why am I angry right now? What does that mean? And very short version of the story, what I discovered is that I was angry because this person didn't realize that my daughter was in the back. And I love that kid more than life itself. And I would give my life in a second for her. How dare they endanger the life of this amazing little human being who brings such joy and such light to the world? What the fuck are they thinking driving like that? And I'm having all of these thoughts in my head, Axel. Well, by now that vehicle is literally 10 kilometers down the road. Like they're so far outside of my reality. And also they have no idea who's in the back of my truck. Like they're just driving the way they're driving for whatever reason. But it was a profound life moment because of her presence in my life. And I realized that, ooh, that anger is a manifestation of my fear that something might happen to her. But then the second thing you ask yourself is, well, how realistic is that that's going to happen? And so I have shared this tip so many times now, which is when you become angry, allow yourself to ask the question, what am I really afraid of right now? Oof. Yeah, it is just transformative. And this is one you talk about like, oh, I wish I would have known this when I was younger. Oh man, do I wish I would have known this when I was younger. This would have solved years and years of challenges for me. But it all came from her. Like that was the wisdom that I gained in that moment because she and I were souls that were interacting with each other. But I literally could get on an entire podcast with you, and in an hour and 20 minutes, we wouldn't even scratch the surface of what she has taught me. Not just with her presence in my life, but things she has said to me that I then am like, wow, never thought about that before. Never thought about life in that way. Or just the joy of simplicity. I had this remembrance the other day. We have this large section of carpet in our house, and when she was little, she used to play daddy gorilla, a baby gorilla. And so I would get on all fours and I would walk on the carpet on all fours. And she would lay on my back and sort of loll her head to the side like she had seen in the nature specials, like little gorillas do when they lay on their parents' back. And she would say, daddy, walk, daddy, walk. And I would walk like a gorilla on all fours, right? And there is no ROI on that, Axel. Like nobody is saying, hey, great job. You sold another 1,000 books. Right? Nobody is saying, look at the way your bank account moved. Nobody is saying this is the amount you influenced another life. But in that moment, that was the most important thing I could have done in the entire planet was that. And I learned that from her, and so, yeah, it would be a very lengthy and very fun discussion to have about all of those things. But that's the opportunity that you have. Yeah.
Wow. So if you track down anger you will always find fear.
I believe so. I'm open to somebody questioning that and saying that's not the truth. For myself, I've discovered it is the truth. Now, there's definitely layers that you often have to go through. And sometimes you're just like, nope, I just want to be angry. I don't want to address it. I don't want to deal with it. But I have yet to discover one that didn't have a fear somewhere laying layers deep.
I agree. I really agree. This is something there are a couple of incredible teachers, mentors in my life. And I remember hearing this piece of advice as well. Like, if you track down anger, you will always find fear. So when you get angry, you ask yourself, okay, what am I afraid of? I find that one of those things that will definitely make it to the book.
Yeah, it's a life changer, completely.
We're coming to the end of the interview, and there are a couple of questions that I always ask. But before that, I wanna share my appreciation. I had a blast preparing for this interview, listening to the interviews you've done, reading your work, and now even when I have the full picture, it makes it even so much better. The fact that you say, well, I've never written a book. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but you know what? This feels really right. I want to do this.
It's something that I hope everybody embraces. You talked about it in other pieces of sort of life wisdom. One of the other like major ones was that every expert started off knowing nothing about what they became an expert in. Like, really let that one sink in. And you realize that we all start at the same place, which is clueless, clueless but curious. And from there, everyone goes on to greatness in whatever way they decide to be great. And the interesting thing about that is, as you're on that journey, like, you get better. You know, yeah, you maybe don't know it all at the start. I certainly didn't in anything that I eventually became proficient in, but you get better and better and better. And then it's less intimidating. I just finished, I can't remember when exactly it's going to air, but I have a book coming out in October when I hope that we'll have a chance to hang out with each other when I'm back in Germany.
We'll be out by then, yeah.
And so this book is 46 questions that fans have asked about, like, how do I win the game of life? Like, here's some of the most important questions about life. Axel, if someone had asked me that before I went on my first big trip, I'd have been like, I have nothing to offer here. Like, how am I possibly going to answer even one of these questions? I don't know, right? Mm-hmm. But I've been on the planet an additional 20 plus years, and I've had the chance to look at people and see their stories. I've had a chance to look inside myself and what I've learned along the way. And so when I decided to write the answers to those questions, it wasn't intimidating. I didn't fear failure. I didn't worry that I'd get it wrong. I was just like, okay, I'll just do my best. Like, I think there's something there. I think I have something to offer. And I think that comes, like I said, with practice, with confidence that gets built by doing. And so that would be one of my other major takeaways that I hope somebody embraces on this is, don't feel like you have to be a pro right from the get-go to actually embark on an adventure. As a matter of fact, the opposite. Expect that at the beginning, you know nothing, but you'll figure it out. And that's what enables me to do new projects. It's what enables me to try and do something I've never done before. And it sort of gives you confidence in other arenas too. You know, you're like, okay, well, I've never written a movie script, but I have written books, like I've written stories. So sure, I'll give this a try. Or I've never kayaked a class 5 river, but I've written a book and I never knew how to do that. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's connection points of confidence.
1,000,000%.
Yeah.
I remember I was in my early 20s, right before I was traveling. I was taking a lot. It felt like I was learning so much. And I'm a big movie guy. I love movies and I love documentaries even more. And I was like, I want to make my own documentary. I went to Bangladesh. I saw climate refugees, and I'm like, I want to make a documentary about this. I've never done this before. And like, I don't even know how it unfolded, but I ended up actually doing it with the biggest TV channel in Austria. And it went out, and like, people ask me like, now we have conversations about, how did you do it? I'm like, I don't know. I just say, this is what I want to do. The how, I don't know. Otherwise, I would have done it already. I'll just figure it out.
Yeah.
I go step by step by step. I ask people, I study people, I'll invite people for dinner who know how to do it and see how can I bring them value, and then I'll figure it out. But I think the important part that I heard also in your story is like, you really, like, it needs to be a calling.
Totally.
Like, I want to do this.
Totally.
Like, I really want to do this.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can do it. You could say, well, I want to become an expert on options trading, right? And you might be able to do that using the same techniques that we just described. I just don't think if you have passion around it that you can sustain the path to victory. Like at some point your energy is going to run out, or you're going to feel a calling from something that is more passionate. And so it's hard to be really great or victorious at something that is not in alignment with your passions and your purpose. You can do it. I just don't think you're going to hit the same level of success.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And I wasn't done with my appreciation letter here. I want to share this moment. I mentioned it at the beginning of our interview. So we finished writing the book, and I was like, what kind of goals do I set for our team and this book? How many people do we want to help? Because I'm really convinced it's a good book. It's going to impact a lot of people. So I'm like, how many, like, give me a number. Like, I have no clue. I've never published a book. I don't know, right? I have published programs and videos and It was like, before the interview, I said 10,000. That would be a nice number. I have no clue. Like, but I'm an athlete. I love numbers. Like, I need a target. I need a goal. I know for some people it works. For some people it maybe doesn't. I need it. I know that from the past. Like, I need a number so that I have something to aim for. And then I studied your work. We had the conversation. I'm like, somehow this number, 1 million people, if I could help 1 million people with this book, that would be amazing. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, this interview we had gave me so much confidence. Like, there was someone sitting in front of me, you, John, looking at me, giving me this, like, yeah, you can do anything. Like, if you're committed enough. I've never done a movie, but like, I want to make a movie, so I'm going to make a movie.
Yeah.
I remember you saying, like, I want to make I think it was a top 10 song.
Right. Top 10 of the pop charts. Yeah.
Top 10 pop charts. Why not me? And I'm like, I should listen to that advice. And I went out. I remember we had the team meeting the next day. I'm like, we gonna help 1 million people with this book. And I'm not stopping before we hit that goal. I'm committed. And like, all of the sudden, my brain came up with all different ideas. I'm like, what I need to do is go the extra mile. I need to go on world tour. I need to go to India. We need to translate the book into this language. We need to go to India. We need to go to Bangladesh. We need to go to Indonesia. We need to go to places that most authors don't go to. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my brain starts working, and all because I allowed myself to dream a bit bigger.
It's really interesting, isn't it? It's like, well, why is that? And maybe this goes back to the cosmic algorithm of the universe, that the collection of information is out there. It's simply a matter of what are you typing into the search bar. And so if you typed in, how do I sell 10,000 books, you'd get a certain level of data, certain type of clues and techniques. But if you type in, how do I sell 1 million books, right, you get something else. Equally interesting is, what if you don't type in, how do I sell 1 million books? Because is the goal really to sell 1 million, or is the goal to inspire 1 million people to read it? Well, maybe the goal isn't even to inspire 1 million people to read it. What if it's to inspire 1 million people through the content? Ooh, okay, so now I'm talking about audio. Maybe I'm talking about video. You're right. It just opens up a whole new set of curiosities and channels, and enables you to do things such as finding people who have found success through different vehicles. And or just, I love doing things that nobody has ever done before. Like, I love trying something. Love that. Yeah. So
you just by you saying that, I was like, okay, you mentioned this audio. I was like, yeah, there will be an audiobook. And I'm like, in my brain, I was like, oh my gosh, I have more than 1 million people downloading my podcast. So I've already done this.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
That was like an aha moment for me. And I wanted to share this with you because the conversation really impacted me in a nice way. There's another learning that I had on that day. I hosted a retreat, and we had an amazing time, but there were a few people who didn't have a good time. And I love what I do. I don't know how many retreats I've already hosted. I know they are good. I don't need anybody's approval anymore. Like, I've done the program before. I know it's good. I know it helps people. So I don't need that confirmation. But when I heard that, I was like, Like, I would be lying if I would say it didn't affect me. Of course it affects me. Like, I care about my work. I've been there for like 4 days working 16 hours per day to make it a good experience. I feel sorry for a person who signs up for a program or retreat and they don't enjoy it. It made me sad. And then we had the conversation and you were talking about your books. And I was like, I want to do something. I've read your books. I know they're really good. I love them. I know a lot of people who like your books, but I want to see if there are a couple of like 1-star reviews.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a second. We have read the same book, didn't we? And I was reading the reviews. I'm like, interesting perspective. And it helped me so much that evening to like, okay, some of the people that I really look up to, they get bad reviews as well. So Axel, that is okay. That's part of the game. And it did a lot for me that day. And I wanna appreciate you for that, also saying those kind of things, like intention matters. Like, you, for me, I have my own definition of success, and I know everybody who reads your books, they have their own version of success if they read and do the action steps. You embody my version of success, of where I want to get in life, and I want to appreciate you for that, because when you speak about I want to be the best father possible, like, that is something I can resonate with, because you also have such a profound impact with your books and everything. It was like such a good role model for me, such a good person that I want to spend time with.
Well, I appreciate that immensely. And this goes back to the flow, that because I'm a little farther on the life path age-wise than you, I will tell you, one of the interesting things to me has been the realization of and I'm not this old yet, but why do grandparents and people that are in their like 70s and 80s so enjoy being around young children? And the answer is because it makes them feel young again. You know, it brings them back to a time when they also were like that. And it also reminds them that they have something to give, that they have love to give, that they can make a contribution, you know. And so one of the things I've learned as my life has progressed is how much I enjoy transitioning from the person who is the one doing to the one trying to inspire other people to do. Not that I don't want to keep doing. I still love throwing on my backpack, getting out there, seeing the world, trying a river that I've never tried, getting on a boat and seeing a part of the ocean I've never been to before. But there's a whole new level of appreciation that I have when someone like you, who is out there doing amazing things, sharing your story, and to hear that even if I was 1/10 of 1,000th of a percent of what helped them have the confidence to do that, it gives me energy. It's what keeps me going. It's what validates for me that the stuff that I've contributed has been worth it. And I think at the end of the day, in our last moments of existence, you know, there's numerous movies with a scene that sort of captures this, and the character says, "Tell me that I did a good job," you know, on their deathbed. And I think on some level, we all want to get to the end and feel like our life had meaning, that we not only did, saw, and experienced the things that we wanted to, but that in the process of doing that, that the world was a little bit better when we were leaving than when we first arrived. Like, we made a difference in a positive way. And so I greatly appreciate you sharing that story. And that to me is like the phase of life I'm at now, to do my best to give a platform or to give information or to somehow help the next generation of people who are going to be writing. Because again, my daughter hopefully will be reading my own stuff too, but guess who she and her friends are reading, right? 10 years from now. I mean, I hope my books are still around and still popular, but people often connect with someone who is just that next generation above them, that 10 years above them, right? And so that's the role that you're playing. And so, no, it's a circular thing, man. It's this constant interplay of energies in big, beautiful ways. So I'm honored that our paths have crossed and that we get to do that.
Well, I can already confirm this is an official statement that you are not just 1%, but just by honestly, like, because of that conversation, I was like, I want to do 1 million people. I want to help 1 million people with this book, improve their lives. And that would have not been possible without you and our conversation. So I'm like, interesting. I want to dive deeper into your work. You mentioned a book that should be out by now, right?
Yeah, I've had a big couple of projects this year. So the first one was something we talked about a tiny bit offline, which was taking the pieces of life. Like, we've had this great conversation, you and I, now twice, because you were kind enough to appear on my show, and I've totally enjoyed this conversation. And
yeah,
sadly, as much as you spend an hour and a half talking, you always feel like there's so much more to talk about in so many pieces. And people were asking me a lot of questions about what are the key things to success? Like, what do I need to do? And some of them we've talked about, the reaching out to people who know something that you don't know and embracing the fact that you don't know anything at the beginning. That's fine. And anger is a manifestation of fear. And I realized that there are these foundational elements of life. And when you know them, they enable you to grow your path in any direction that you want to go. If you don't have them in place, then you can start building the life that you want. But sadly, very often it's built on a foundation that's not going to sustain you. At some point, there's either a piece of knowledge that you don't know, or there's an unsupportive belief system in place. And the higher you go, the bigger the structure. If the foundation isn't strong enough, at some point it's going to collapse. And I can say that with 100% certainty in my own life. And so I was getting these questions so often. And so I said, okay, well, what can I create that is not necessarily another book, but that is something that will help people build this foundation? And so I also took inspiration from others, much like you described. And I was like, well, I don't really know how to do video work a lot, but what the heck, I'll give it a shot. And so my team and I worked very hard to create what I call a foundational course, and it's something called Grow and Thrive. And the idea is that someone who goes through this experience over the course of the 4 weeks is able to build this foundation so that no matter where they decide to take their life, they've got these core principles in place and it's not going to collapse underneath them. I wish I would have known this stuff when I was 17, 18. This is my great dream, that as early as possible in life that people build this foundation. And so that was one of our huge projects this year. I think I took it on in the same way that you took on the documentary, actually, although I much more admire that. I think the documentary to me seems like so big. Like, I don't know, I'll be tapping into your courage for that one when I'm thinking about film projects. But in much the same spirit, I took this on and was like, all right, I don't know exactly how to do this, but I'll give it a shot. I'll ask a lot of people. And so I was very, very pleased when we launched with the feedback that we got from people, and that was very inspiring. So that was one of my big projects for the year. The second project was this book,
link to this,
the Book of Questions. Yeah. And so that's done now. And so now my focus for the year is the movie project for the cafe. But I'll be back on tour. I'll be coming to Germany in October. And so I'll be on tour for the new book, and probably in
we already have a title for the new book?
Yeah, it's called, in German, I don't remember the German, I know the words in English, but it's Time for Questions. And so that's, if you translate that directly into German, which you can do.
Zeit für Fragen?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So wait, say that again. Let me try and say it in German.
Zeit
Yeah.
für
Okay.
Fragen.
Zeit für Fragen.
Exactly.
Even close? That even, I mean, seriously, as a pure native German speaker, was that even close, or was it like?
It was close. It was close. People would understand.
They'd understand, but they'd be like, dude has a major accent. Like, I don't know exactly.
Yeah. 1,000,000%.
It's always hilarious to me when someone says it to you and you think you say it back perfectly, and they're like, yeah. And you know, like, you didn't get it.
Yeah, I mean, I did get it. I for sure did get it. And I also, like, it's so interesting for me to, this may be the final question. Why do you think like your books, when I grew up, they're everywhere. Everybody, like in German, it feels like, also I see it online on Instagram, like the German community, the German speaking community, they really resonate with your books and your work. Why do you think that is?
I mean, a lot of people ask me that question who come from the German speaking countries. And so it's not just that, like if we talked numbers, which I won't go into, but like you'd see similar experiences in other countries as well. So the book is translated into 44 languages, and in some countries, like nobody's reading it. And in other countries, like it's very, very, very successful and popular. And I think part of it is cultural, like what in the storyline of that culture existed so that people either already had a connection to the more bigger philosophical questions, like why am I here? So maybe it's a culture that had some degree of philosophical underpinnings, or maybe it's a culture that existed where there were structures in place that didn't allow people to ask the questions, but those questions I think are core to humans. And so now people are saying, okay, I really want to ask those questions. And I realized in reading this book, I'm not alone in asking those questions. And so then they start talking about it with other people. I think in today's era, this is like a weird connection point, but there is so much stuff out there that the only way something is going to become super successful, you can't market it to that level. Like it's got to be word of mouth. There has to be something in the experience of the user that they enjoy so much that they would then want to introduce it to their best friend, to their parent, to their sister. And so when I do book signings, I can't tell you the number of times I say, oh, how did you hear about the book? Oh, my sister gave it to me. Oh, my best friend gave it to me. As a matter of fact, this is her. We came today together. Oh, my mom gave it to me, or I gave it to my mom. And so I think that's one of the ways in which you can tell whether whatever you're offering to the world is connecting is when, regardless of what you're doing to let the world know it's out there, like other people are talking about it for you. And for some reason, somehow, the story of the cafe and the other stuff that I've written connects with people in a way that they talk about it with other people. Yeah. Which is, I'm so grateful to the fans. Were it not for the fans, like we wouldn't be having this conversation. There'd be no #1 spot on the bestseller list for all those years, but it's the fans that are sharing it with other people and having these beautiful conversations that all make it happen.
John,
I mean, how did you get it? Do you remember? Like, this is always interesting to me. Do you remember, did you hear about it or did somebody give it to you?
Somebody gave it to me.
Yeah, there you go.
Like I was during a time I love reading books, but it was during a time I wasn't.
Yeah, and that's honestly one of the highest compliments I've ever gotten from people is when they say, I don't read books, but I read yours. You know, and I write in a very simple format, which to your point about 1-star reviews, like, yeah, if you want to see the people who don't like what I write, it's the people who are like super MFA, Masters in Fine Arts, lovers of big literature, bless their hearts, but I don't write that way. So it's never going to check your box, everybody. I write in a very simple format. So
that is, but it's, you know, we are speaking about it. I don't know how it is for you, but I know of this and it still affects me at times.
I think this is the game, Axel. Like this is what I meant before. Like just about the time you think you've got it all figured out, you're going to be challenged in a way that you don't. So yeah, you're like doing something that you love. It's fulfilling your purpose. You're seeing it have a positive impact. And then somebody gets on there and rips you to shreds and you're like, you're crushed. Like you're emotional. Like what the, but funny that you described it the way you did. I did the exact same thing. The first time someone ever wrote a 1-star review, I was just horrified and crushed. I couldn't believe it. And they were so toxic in what they wrote. And I was like, I'm the only one going through this. And I looked at one of my favorite books online. It's a book by Mitch Albom called Tuesdays with Morrie. And sure enough, like 5% of the reviews were 1-star. And I was like, what? How can anyone not like that book? Like that book is so amazing. And I just realized like there's 5% of the population that is going to hate something, no matter what it is. And it has nothing to do with you. It's not about you. It's not about your content. At that moment in life, for whatever reason, they're just in a hating mood. Don't take it personal. And don't make it personal either. Do your best to not like turn, toxic back on the person. That's the tough one, right? Because you're like, okay, what the hell? But like you can't control that. Focus on the one. Focus on the 5-star reviews. Focus on the people who you're serving and who love what you do.
Yes. Perfect ending. John, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and being such a good role model for me. Like, honestly, I mean it. Those 2-3 hours we spent together, I learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody listening, watching did as well. And so I'm going to put all of your books, obviously, your new one as well, in the description box below. I always tell my community, make a deal with yourself, feed your mind for at least 30 minutes per day.
Love that.
At some point you will look back and say like, oh, I'm really happy and grateful that I developed this habit. It's one of those books probably that make a positive difference in your world. You mentioned the course Grow and Thrive. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Put a link down below as well. I might sign up.
Awesome. Awesome.
No, I really mean it. It did, like, I was like, wait a minute. 1 hour with John made me think from 50,000 to 1 million people. Like, I want to get involved. And so I'll put every link down below. And then, John, I hope our paths cross in real life as well. Maybe
I totally get the sense they will. I mean, I totally got the vibe when I was like, yeah, I wish we were sitting here on the ocean. Like, it was such a strong sense. I totally see that at some point we're going to be doing surfing together or hanging out somewhere together. And yeah, I'm going to throw the gratitude back at you as a closing thought. And, you know, it's what you offer, what you share with the world, and sharing your story and sharing the challenges that you've overcome and the way in which you did it and the struggles that you've had. That's what inspires people to deal with their own stuff, Axel. And there's just never enough of that in the world. And you do it in a way that is gracious. You do that in a way that it was open and honest and raw. And that takes great courage, which I totally appreciate. And, you know, you're out there making a positive difference in the world. And that is just it's so awesome in the context of all that is out there. And so I'm very grateful for what you do and the way that you do it. And, you know, we've had a chance. It's weird because you can meet somebody and you're like, you get no connection, or you can meet someone and you're like, this is someone that I could hang with and like enjoy a week of looking forward to dinners and talking and whatever. And so I definitely feel like it's the birth of a friendship, and I look forward to our paths crossing, not just once somewhere, but hopefully a lot of times over the course of our existence.
1,000,000%. Thank you. Thank you, John.
I really hope you enjoyed today's episode, just as a little gift from our side, from my team, because you stayed until the end of this episode. 30 days of free Fire Within membership. I created the Fire Within membership to give you guys access to the tools that have changed my life, the lives of my clients, and give you also access to a community of like-minded people. We have guided breathwork sessions, guided meditations, guided visualization practices, really tools that enable you to create the life that you deserve and that you want. And it's one of the best things we have ever created. Hundreds of people, live events, sessions that will blow your mind. 30 days for free. You will find the link in the description. Thank you so much, and until next time.